Good morning, house guests. How are you doing? Come on in for this iced tea. This is me, your undomesticated hostess, and today we are talking about It Ends With Us lawsuit and some of the parallels we see as far as DV. And I honestly think that Justin Baldoni is part of the 10% of male victims either experiencing SH, DV, SA, all of that. And I think, well, the purpose of this episode is just to point a little bit of the parallels about that. We're also going to look at Steve Sarwitz's very long deposition, and there's a lot of nuggets in there. I think it's important to note that in a lot of DV or abusive relationships, there is this collateral damage that happens when you're being isolated, is that your abuser would want to attack others on your periphery to isolate you even more. So we can look at Steve Sarowitz and his charity, for an example, as an example of collateral damage in a DV scenario relationship. If you were to compare, you know, take the characteristics out of this lawsuit and compare it to DV. Like I said, male SASH is relatively low. It is 10%. There is a pretty intense stigma that comes up as far as male SA and male being victims, because it goes against the standard. And honestly, I think that maybe Blake Lively, allegedly, in my opinion, took this to her advantage because she may believe, and we can kind of see this in some of the deposition questions that Attorney Gottlieb says, that essentially males cannot be SA'd, SH, or abused, or will even speak up to complain because it goes against the grain. Now you will see this, and I think this was going to go against the Blake Lively camp if they take this to court, because what they're going to see is they're going to see a lawyer attack a male about some pretty serious things, SASH, feelings of uncomfortableness, feelings of being violated. And this is coming from a man. This is not coming from a woman. And in his deposition, Justin did say what happened to him did essentially violate or go against some of his religious beliefs. And that is also going to be brought up in court in front of these jurors. So I really think that this whole lawsuit in front of the jury is going to turn into who is the real abuse victim and who was the person in power, and how that dynamic works against Wayfair in this society of the Me Too movement. But the Me Too movement can also apply to men. And that is what Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, I think, are ignoring and not realizing, among other things. So thank you guys for joining me. Today, I will state a couple of facts about male victims, just from a couple of websites that I looked at. This is rain.org. The webpage is Get the Facts About SV Against Men and Boys. I think it's a really good resource. I have used this resource in my life. And male survivors struggle with self-doubt. So you can see that in the text messages that Justin Baldoni is texting Melissa Nathan. Is this real? Is this bots? Are people coming to my defense? And he's doing this pretty frequently every day, looking for that reassurance, looking for that, some sort of self-confidence, some sort of self-esteem, some more support. Physiological confusion, That necessarily doesn't apply in this instance, but there's a question that is posed. What does it mean that I had action or elated? Some other masculinity myths. Does this make me less of a man? And I think this goes into, Justin Baldoni's podcast, Being Man Enough. Are you man enough to say no in certain situations? And then this just goes on as far as other facts. Says 1 in 6 men are victims of can be victims of abuse, and of course there's that stigma for reporting it, and things like that. So when you take a look at Justin Baldoni's deposition and the way that Mr. Gottlieb is kind of interrogating him, it kind of gets into a cringe area. And like I said, it may not play good for the jury. And like we saw in the Diddy trial, when Cassie was on the stand, they had to be very careful about how they pose their questions, because you don't want the jury not only to hate, the plaintiff party, but you don't want the jury to hate the lawyer. And if you're going around a very sensitive topic like SHSA, and especially male SH, that's not going to go good for the jury, and that's not going to go good for Blake and or Ryan's camp. So let me just read some of Justin Baldoni's deposition, because I think that's going to be part of what's going to play out in court as well. So let's get started. So we're going to start off with the TED Talk question. It says, okay, after that TED Talk that you gave, answer yes at TED Women. Question, do you recall being asked the question prompting that answer? Did you ever feel like you were harassed or victimized on set? Answer, I don't remember that. Question, okay, but as you sit here today, this is the first example that you have brought up in response to my questions of whether you've ever been SH'd. His answer, that's the first response that I think you've asked me if I've talked about it publicly. Okay. Yeah. Why did you feel harassed by what this producer did? Well, he was asking me to get naked in the hot tub with him and standing very close to me with his naked genitals, like intentionally walking close to my face. It was just him and I in there. And he was using the idea that no. So he didn't assault you? I wouldn't call it assault. I don't believe I characterized it as assault. I didn't say you did, sir. Yeah. And here where it goes to more of like a turn of a victimization type thing. And tell me, if you were a female, how would you feel about this questioning? Yeah, you were bigger and stronger than this guy, right? I would imagine I was. This wasn't someone the size of Dwayne Johnson or The Rock or something like that. Like, really? Does that really matter? The size and everything? Does that really matter? This situation seems very uncomfortable to me. Just what he just said. I don't care how big or tall you are. You're going to come unclothed and pressure in a hot tub. I don't care if you're a man, a woman, an animal, whatever. That is just uncomfortable. And I would consider that SH or SA. I'll continue. He says, I would imagine I was. This wasn't okay. And then we go back to, I'm sorry. Justin replies, it was not. So if it had come to it, you probably could have knocked the guy out. Let's put a female in this. If it came to it, you could probably, I don't know, scratch the guys out. Why didn't you kick the guy? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you punch him? Do you see where it's getting a little bit abusive in the questioning and how that could play into a jury? Like you're really gonna pick on this guy for this horrific experience? Really? All Wayfair's side has to do is flip this questioning into if you were a female and experiencing this. And it'd be cringe worthy. Hi, Girly C. Hi, Just Khaleesi. Thank you all for being here. I much appreciate it. Thank you for all of the love. And then there's an objection from Ms. Shapiro. And then this is what Justin says. And this is what happens a lot in SA and SH. Okay. Witness. I'm not much of a fighter. I would have left. So what would you do in this situation? I don't even think I would have left. I think I would have been silent, uncomfortable, and I probably would have let whatever happen just because this is just straight out of the paranormal, to be honest. And then Mr. Gottlieb continues, and I think, Mr. Gottlieb did a horrible job at cross-examination or doing this deposition. But he asks, you didn't work for the guy, right? No. So you had no employment relationship with him? No, I didn't. Okay. Do you know who he was? I think he told me his name, but did you try and find him after the incident and talk to him about it? Side note, would you talk to your SAR about it? Honestly? Did Blake? No. Blake talked to everybody else about it except the person who she said. Answer, no. Did you find him before you talked about this event in Glamour magazine? Miss Shapiro, objection. Witness, no. You didn't want to give him an opportunity to take accountability for his actions and make it right? I didn't name him, but you described him and described who he was, friends with, and the spot you were in. Objection. The witness. I don't know if I described who his friends are, which is pretty interesting on why they're taking this take. I really would like to know if there's like an SH or SA claim coming from Wayfair because, as we've gone through some of the stuff, it really does look like the shoe was on the other foot and they're just deflecting. And then it continues with this absurd questioning, in my opinion. Do you know his name as you sit here today? No. I think you've already talked about your experience with your college girlfriend. Is that right? Yes. Did you ever go back to talk to any of your college friends or people that might have hung out with mutually to tell them what you were going to do? I don't know anybody from back then. Do you have any idea whether or not your college girlfriend would agree with the way you have remembered the events relating to the losing of your virginity? Objection. Witness. I don't know what she would think. I don't know who she is anymore. So they just go on with this questioning about this college girlfriend and whether or not he should have asked for permission for sharing his own story. Um, and it just goes on, and I'm going to read this last question. And this last question is going to be a little bit triggering because it does have to do with his faith. And like I said, they're really harping on faith um, in some of these things. So I'm so sorry. It's interesting. Question. Am I right that one of the things that was most traumatic about this to you is that you, and it doesn't really finish the whole question, but the answer is a set with all Baha'is? I don't know. So they're starting to question him on his Baha'i faith. And whether those principles are established within Wayfair Studios. So it just goes on from there. But you can see what's probably going to happen in court, how they're attacking him and his very personal and traumatic experience that does happen to other genders, both male and female. And this is going to be a bad move for the Blake Lively camp, in my opinion. I really do think that Wayfair has a really good SASH Uno card. Like, you're going to accuse me of SA or SH, but look at your own actions, because it can happen on both sides. And I think Wayfair has a better argument with that. Now, let's go over some of Steve Sarowitz deposition. In it, he does say what the collateral damage of all of this is. He does include the threats, the violence, and even the threats against their own foundation, their own charitable foundation. And like I said, what happened to Steve Sarowitz, his family, the charity that they run, again, I think it's just another example of collateral damage and what you could see in a DV situation or a very abusive relationship. There's collateral damage that can happen, that occur with like best friends, children, pets, family members become targets and are used as a pawn against the victim. And I think this is a perfect showing of that in this deposition. This starts off with Miss Garofalo. She says, again, other than advice you may have been provided by attorneys, you can answer. And then our favorite lawyer, Mr. Gottlieb, continues. I'm just going to check with the chat. The Uno reverse card is real, and I'm definitely waiting for all of those little tidbits, breadcrumbs, and hot tea, because I really do feel that Wayfair is still playing the nice guy game. And if you look at their summary judgment, they didn't attack Blake. They attacked the equality claims. And the evidence is showing that Blake's statements may not be as she said. So I really do think that they're playing the nice guy long game. And in the end, these nice guys, they're going to win and they're not going to finish last. Just my opinion. What do you guys think? And shout out to my dad. If my dad is here, shout out to the Philippines. Sorry I missed you, Dad, the other day, but I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you can hear this podcast. Love you. Okay, question. I am not asking you for your conversations with your lawyers. As you sat in the boardroom as a board member, I imagine a proposal was presented. It's a serious proposal. It meant shutting down an organization that I imagine you'd given a lot of time and money to. And all I'm trying to ask is why you decided to do that. And this is they're talking about the charity and the foundation that, remember, he had to shut down after this lawsuit and the fire and everything. One of the deciding factors was death threats against both me and my family as a result of this litigation. Question. And as a result of those threats, sorry, what else did you want to say? Man, this lawyer must be rude. And arson at my house. And that informed the decision to shut down the foundation in that way. You were asking me about my personal opinion, correct? I was asking you about why you made the decision to support closing the foundation. Well, as I said before, the board made the decision. And then you asked me about have those threats been made to your knowledge against other employees, directors? Let's start with employees. Are you aware of any threats that have been made to employees of the foundation? There was a threat made to the foundation itself. And what was that threat? I don't recall the exact threat, but I remember we had to get security. And it was during the course of this litigation where I want to say this very clearly. Anti-Semitism was weaponized against me and anything I was associated with, even though I'm Baha'i. And it was weaponized violently and purposefully. And as someone who lost 20 members of my family in the Holocaust and was beaten up for being Jewish when I was a child, lost my great grandfather who I'm named after, I don't appreciate that. And I want to go on the record as saying that religious prejudice has no place in America. Do you remember how I said that they were targeting and attacking the faith? I'm really glad that they brought this up. This is really sad, just Khaleesi. It is sad, but I'm hoping that we can all bring more awareness to this situation and give more light to where maybe Blake Lively was trying to overshadow. America! Love it. I love you guys. Thank you, audience. Thank you, house guests. And if anybody wants some fairy gardens, let me know. All goes to charity. Okay. Question. And I appreciate all that. And I'm deeply sorry that that occurred. I'm also a descendant of Holocaust survivors. And so I don't appreciate either. I'm trying to understand the link between the threats that you received and your decision respecting the foundation. I think I understand you to be saying that that link is this threat that the foundation itself received. Am I understanding you correctly? I would be so mad if I had to answer this question again. Answer. In addition to the personal death threats, in addition to the death threats and kidnapping threats and arson against my family, The foundation also received a threat as a direct result of this litigation because of the actions taken by the people within this litigation, which were purposely leveled against me and my family. You know, he has every right to be mad. I mean, his family was threatened. Ask me what happened when my family was threatened. Dad, don't answer that in the chat, okay? Like, seriously, this is your family's safety. This is very traumatizing. My own kids were threatened, and I had to go through months and months and months of specialized therapy just to be able to go to certain places because I was so afraid. Hi, Dad, from Bohol. Okay. Answer. As a direct result, that anti-Semitic threats against you and the Wayfair Foundation, you said, I think you testified, are direct results of actions taken by people in this litigation. Ms. Garofalo, objection. The witness, yes. Heck yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy if that arson and all those threats were actually coming from, allegedly, in my opinion, the other side? Does anybody think that? Or does anybody think that some crazy person went rogue in honor of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds? Anybody? I'm going to put that tinfoil hat on because this is just crazy. We need some receipts. I hope the receipts are coming. I hope they are. Okay. Question: by which people? Answer: I don't know who authorized it, but I know it was done by someone on the other side. Is that where my receipts are? I know it was done by someone on the other side. Do you think that when Ryan Reynolds or Blake Lively mentioned they work like the mafia, maybe this is something a mafia person would do? Fire, arson? What do you think, chat? Dad, do you know anything about mafia stuff? Does the mafia like set things on fire? Is that like their MO? Or do they just buy judges and producers and everything like that? Question: that doesn't surprise you? Answer: no, it does not. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I just had to laugh. You're the financier of Wayfair Studios. Yes. You're a co-founder? Yes. Is Wayfair Studios an LLC? I believe so. Who are the members? I don't recall. Who are the shareholders? Objection. Witness: the major shareholders are Justin and myself. That's why they went after Wayfair. It's because Justin Baldoni was a shareholder. Question: do you know what the? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you have something else you wanted to say? Man, you're so mean. Okay. Do you know what the ownership percentages are as of, let's start with today, between you and Mr. Baldoni? Not exactly. Do you have a rough estimate? Is that 103? Sorry, some of the pages kind of jump around. My question first. I don't recall. And I think this is different questioning, but you don't recall saying that. Do you dispute saying that? Ms. Garofalo, objection. Witness, no. Do you recall giving an interview that is on YouTube entitled Billionaire Steve Sarowitz on Wealth, Philanthropy, and ethical success in August of 2024. They're really mad at this goodwill stuff. Oh my God, it's Mean Girl versus Jesus. Answer, yes. Do you recall saying about Mr. Heath that you could pull rank on him because it's your money in October of 2024? Who cares about October 24? Answer, I don't recall the exact contents. Question, is that true? Answer, is what true? That the money in Wayfair Studios is your money? Yes. And is it true that in effect allows you to pull rank on Mr. Heath if you choose to do so? Answer, that's too broad. Skips another page, I think, but it continues. The truth about Baldoni and Wayfair. His lawyer says he was barely involved with the film. Besides providing the funding, he only visited the set twice and was not involved in the PR for the film. Do you see that? Yes. I think they're talking from another deposition because that was in quotes. Question, is all of that accurate? Answer, yeah. Oh, wait. Could you ask me specifically? Are you asking me specifically about the statement that we provided, or are you asking me about the previous thing? Could you tell me if what you're asking me is accurate? Fair clarification. Is everything after, through his lawyer, accurate? And I'm not sure what they're referring to, but answer. Can you read specifically the words? Because I want to make sure this is a very important point. Is it accurate that you were barely involved with the film besides providing its funding? Yes. Is it accurate that you only visited the set twice? Yes. And it wasn't during the birthing scene, remember? Is it accurate that you were not involved in the PR for the film? Yes. And that was all of the information that was provided in response to this third allegation. Is that right? I don't recall. In other words, you don't see here anywhere that it's actually false that I provided input and ideas on ways to negatively influence the narrative against Miss Lively. That's not true. You don't see that anywhere in here, do you? It's implied very strongly by this answer by saying I'm not involved with the PR, that I would not, since I wasn't involved with the PR, which is correct, that I would not have provided ideas. Also, we never did a smear campaign. So it's implied strongly. That's your testimony, right? It's my testimony that I never gave any input on ideas or ways to negatively influence the narrative against Miss Lively and her family. It's my testimony that I never did that, then or now. Never? Correct. Even after litigation commenced? Correct. How do you define negatively? Ms. Garofalo, objection. Witness. It's my testimony that the sole intent was to use my money to promote the truth about Baldoni and Wayfarer. So if I were to take out the word negatively from this sentence and ask you, did you ever provide input and ideas on way to influence the narrative? And then I modify against and have it be about, let me read it the way I'm modifying it. And then I'll ask you the question. Did you ever provide input and ideas on ways to influence the narrative about Miss Lively and her family? Objection. Witness? No. I don't think Mr. Gottlieb is good at cross-examination or arguments for that matter. Question. You never provided any ideas about ways that the media narrative about Mr. Reynolds could be influenced at any time. I don't recall. Why is Ryan Reynolds popping up? He's not being sued. He's not in this. Do you want to spend a minute and think about it? No. Who wants to think about Ryan Reynolds? There was one time that I suggested that we should point out that Miss Lively had said that Ryan Reynolds rewrote a scene. That we should point out that that was a scene written by a female writer. That was the sole time I remember. And why did you point that out? I don't recall. What influence would it have in coverage of the dispute to point out that it was a female writer? Objection. I don't know. Really? Objection. That's really your testimony as you sit here today. You really don't know why it would have mattered if there had been coverage that followed the suggestion that you made. Objection. I don't know what and then here's it skips a page, so it cuts off. And now it looks like they're talking about money with this cut off end sentence saying, had made on it ends with us by Q2 2025. How would I figure that out? Answer, I don't know. And here we go into some more focused questioning. You really cannot think of a single piece of paper or document or file I could look at that would tell me that. Objection. I'm not involved in the day-to-day running of Wayfair. I imagine you can talk to Wayfair management and ask them. I think I hear a small house guest. Or maybe not. Nope. Here he comes. No one ever provided any kind of report to you that in an ordinary course of your duties and responsibilities as the chairman of the studio that told you how much money this movie made. I don't recall. Why do they care about how much money it made? Do you want to say sleep with me? I will come in just a second, my love. You want to say hi to Pop Pop? Hi, Pop Pop. Your baby's up. And I'll answer the question. I don't recall. Do you recall giving interviews in which you talked about how much money the movie made opening weekend? Yes. Do you recall how much? No. Do you recall it being more than you anticipated? Yes. Yes. And that is, I imagine, genuine sentiment that you were expressing to Mr. Baldoni? Yes. And you recall being very proud of the success of this movie in its opening day, right? Yes. Okay. And you say, as read, your interview has been sterling. Do you see that? Yes. Had you been watching some of Mr. Baldoni's press interviews in connection with the release of the film? Yes. And you thought they were sterling? Yes. Did you participate in any respect in any of the preparation in advance of Mr. Baldoni's interviews? No. Did you yourself did some interview in the first couple weeks that the film was released? Is that right? Can you be more specific? Sure. Did you do any media interviews in conjunction with the release of It Ends With Us? So, let's call it the first couple of weeks of August 2024? Not specifically. Did you do any media interviews that occurred around that time? Yes. And did you prepare for those interviews with the assistance of any people in advance of your interview? Sorry, I'm not trying to hesitate. I'm just trying to remember. Not really. Did you ever receive any kind of talking points or briefing materials in advance of the media interview you were doing in the first 2 weeks of August 2024? Not that I recall. Did you ever discuss with Mr. Baldoni in advance of doing the interviews that you did what might be asked and what you might say? Yes. Okay, I will come back to that. Who did you ask? Ask what? Who did you ask the question to? Did we have any idea that this would be promoted this way? I never asked. You never asked anyone that question, correct? Okay. Did you ever review any of the marketing materials for the film that were created by Wayfair Studios? No. Hang on. Why is the marketing materials important if maximum effort took over? Like, are they, is that the point of contention that they're going to use? Like, oh, Wayfair Studios got mad and maybe they were doing this retaliation because they don't have the marketing? I don't know. Did you ever review any of the marketing? No. Have you ever seen any marketing materials of any kind about the film that were created or influenced or edited by Miss Lively? I was not involved in the marketing. Hey guys, don't forget to subscribe, like, share. Question. And so therefore, you would have no way of knowing whether Miss Lively had any involvement at all in how the film was marketed. Maybe Ryan Reynolds really is the key behind everything. Because if Blake Lively was in charge of marketing, then that means Ryan Reynolds was. I was told that Miss Lively and Sony took over the marketing by Jamie. Would it surprise you to learn that every document that has produced in this case, that and then another page, it's a big skip, it's cut off. Last portion, it says paying for the PR teams. That's you loving me and I appreciate you. That's a quote from something I don't know. It was a question, it looks like. Here we go to the next question, focus question. Was Wayfair paying for the PR teams? Answer. I don't know the details. I just literally don't. You would have to approve that before Wayfair hired a PR team. No. And in this case, you're aware that the agency group was retained to perform crisis communication services. Is that correct? Yes, for the reasons I've already stated. I can go through them again if you'd like. Well, that's not my question. Dude, this guy's totally snarky. Gottlieb. Ugh. I know that they're just doing their lawyer job, but I just feel like it could have been a little bit more friendly in this circumstance. Did you approve the hiring of the agency group? No. Were you asked your opinion on it before they were retained? No. Did you vet the agency group before they were retained? No. Did you have any conversation with Melissa Nathan before they were retained? No. How about street relations? Are you familiar with street relations? Yes. Are you aware that relations was at one point retained by Wayfair? Yes. Were you asked for your view on the retention? I don't recall. Did you approve strike that? Did you speak with Jed Wallace, the head of street relations, before street relations was retained? I don't recall. Question. Do you recall anything about the retention of street relations? Now, if you look at street relations deposition, he clearly covers his backside with a lot of legal strategy, like preserving communications. He called his lawyer so they couldn't talk about how he preserved his communications. Street relations is pretty smart. Street smart. They were retained in regards to, actually, let me change my answer. No, I was not consulted before they were hired. I just had to remember. Okay, what did you just remember? I just remembered when they were hired, because at that point, I was not involved in the day-to-day. Okay. When were they retained? I believe, I'm not 100% sure, sometime around August of 2024. And how? I wasn't involved in that decision. How do you recall learning about that? I don't recall. What do you recall learning about street relations? Not 100% sure, because we've been through this case for, I guess it's been a year and a half, a year now that we've gone through this. And so there's been a lot that's been reported. So in my memory, it may be a little bit confused. But to my knowledge now, I'm not sure if I knew it then. Street Relations was monitoring the negative press against us that was being put out by the Lively camp. Again, they're still on this, their story has not changed. And this is the financier of Wayfair Studios, the most removed person, still testifying, still being deposed, that they were just monitoring. Blake Lively's case is cooked. Question: what does that mean, monitoring? Helping with our crisis PR. What does it mean to monitor social media or PR or press? It skips a page. So now we're going to go on to this cutoff sentence. Made about you that you believe to be defamatory. Answer: again, sorry. I'm just trying to get clarification. I'm not trying to be difficult. During the course of the complaint or part of the complaint, would that be considered, since that was public in the New York Times and Miss Lively was the source of the statement? Would that count? That's for you to tell me. Would that? And Miss Garofalo says, why don't you answer the question with what you believe she publicly said through the New York Times? Witness: okay. Through the New York Times, in the course of the complaint, it was said that I was on set for a scene where she was scantily clad and that I was a non-essential person. While I might have technically been non-essential, I did invest $30 million and paid for her salary, at least my share of it, and as well as the other actors. And I consider that to be essential. Miss Lively considers that to be not to be essential. She can send me a check. I can give her my address, or you could give it to her. But beyond that, I was not on the set for that scene. And although I don't have direct, and then it cuts off. Would you be mad if you paid $30 million to have basically an indie movie made? You hired an actress who was attached to A-listers, I don't know, because some fancy, agency firm said so, and she blew up your budget. She knocked your faith. She's attacking everybody in your life. And I just find this completely just out of control. This whole thing is just out of control. Wow, I could consider 30 million consequences. You know what? I don't think Blake Lively will ever see a $30 million movie being made with her in it ever again, because she is such a liability. Even if she agrees, she reneges, and that is probably the most dangerous thing other than being litigious. They did a very good job at blowing up their own careers. Question: that's all I'm interested in, is how your understanding of how you, Steve Sarowitz, were personally defamed and what she testified to in her deposition. We're going to bracket that. Okay. So they're accusing, which is totally fair, Wayfair accusing Blake Lively of defamation. And really, what is defamation? A knowingly false statement. So if she's saying that she was scantily clad and naked, but actually wore shorts, a belly prosthesis, and a gown, was she really scantily clad, or was she in her actor uniform? I don't know. I guess we'll have to see that video when it comes out. Um, Answer was, okay. Question: I think I understood you to say you believe that there were things in the CRD complaint and the New York Times article that you found to be defamatory about you. Answer: yes. Oh. Question: okay, in the example that you gave of that, I believe, was an allegation about a time when it was alleged that you were on set for a scene where Miss Lively was acting out the scene of giving birth. Is that right? Yes. I want to add one other thing to what I said. Okay. It was insinuated that I went on set for our particularly that scene. I didn't know what scenes were being filmed. Again, I wasn't on set for that scene, but I did not. It was insinuated that I went on set for that particular scene. Of course, like I said, I wasn't on set for that particular scene. And I also made no conscious decision to see Miss Lively in any particular thing because it wasn't important to me. Dang, mic drop. Hey, Dad, I know you're not much up on pop culture, but do you know who Blake Lively is? Just for the chat. And do you know who Ryan Reynolds are? Question: you were on set that day. That day the scene was shot? Yes. And I'm not sure what they're talking about now, but here goes the questioning. And how do you know that? I didn't know it at the time. I was told later in a conversation with someone who was there that, oh yeah, that set was that scene. Because I said, what about that scene? Oh, that was filmed before you got on set. So it looks like there was maybe some confusion, or maybe he was just trying to verify. Question: and there would be records, right? That would show that you traveled to New Jersey. Is that right? Yes. And those travel records would presumably show us when you arrived and when you left. Answer: I would assume so. Are they still trying to place him at this birth scene, just at this allegation so he could look at her hoo-ha? Really? Question: do you have a calendar or diary that you keep? By diary, I mean calendar. Do you keep a calendar? I do, but it wouldn't specifically say which scenes I was there for. But wouldn't the calendar have for, and then it breaks off? Next page. Okay. Then would the same be true for intentional negligent interference with prospective economic advantage, not about you personally? So now I think they're getting into damages with this questioning. As I said, some of these pages are broken up. Answer: and this is the Steve Sarowitz deposition. I'm not as certain on that one. I'd have to know more on that. I'd have to know more on that. I need more detail. The other one. That one possibly. As you sit here today, what is your understanding of the factual basis for intentional and negligent interference with prospective economic advantage against example? Let's start with Ryan Reynolds. Or I'm sorry, with Mr. Reynolds. Why is he here again? Shouldn't they be talking about Blake? What about Blake's business? What about Blake's economical advantage against? Anyways, the reason I'm hesitating is I'm not sure where Wayfair ends and I start. I don't know why the lawyers sued the way they did. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not really an expert on the law, but I can talk about damages done to Wayfair, of which I'm the majority owner. And that would have a negative economic advantage to me as an individual. I don't know if that is what you're asking me. So, side note, with Blake Lively's companies, like her hair care line, she actually has a percent in the holding company. So there's someone in between her and her hair care line, meaning hair care line gets profit. Profit goes to the LLC. The LLC then cuts Blake a check. So they're not directly connected. Betty Boo's, I've read in some news articles that it was a direct like ownership, but again, it's not. There's another entity or two entities in the middle of Blake Lively getting her Betty Boo's check. So the fact that Wayfair has suffered economic damage differs from what Lively's economic damage and arguments would be, because it's not damaging her movie producing company, like this is damaging Sarowitz movie producing company because it's his own money in it. Blake Lively, all she has is her reputation invested in her companies from what it looks like, and she just draws a percentage. This is what Wayfair is a straight, hey, I invested into my stock, I get my dividend straight into my bank account, as opposed to going through shell companies and then giving something else through an escrow or whatever the thing is. I'm not a lawyer. That's just how I'm hypothesizing it and how I understand it. If you want to look more into it, I can certainly ask. Might even ask my civil attorney that I have on speed dial for my own protection. Hi, Dad, and he says hi. Anyways, I'm gonna get back to this question. So I think they're making a really good point, and I really hope that this could be used maybe in an appeal, or they just sue Ryan Reynolds. Wouldn't that be nice to see a lawsuit against Ryan Reynolds himself? I think he's the ultimate devier. I think he's the ultimate manipulator. I think there's some weird negative relationship going on between him and Blake Lively that is not exactly healthy, and maybe that's where she has learned some of these tactics. But that's just my opinion. I'll continue with the deposition questioning of Steve Sarowitz. Question. I'm not asking you questions about damages to Wayfair. I'm talking about the claims you personally raised. But and then it cuts off. There's an answer, yes. It looks like they're on to another document about employee handbook. And remember, one of Blake Lively's claims was they didn't have any workplace standards. It was unsafe, HR problems, things like that. I'm just going to check with the chat. Ryan is like Beetlejuice. He appears if you say his name and 3 times fast. And that is why I'll not say his name 3 times fast, because I'm afraid that he's watching this podcast. And I would love to get monetized and give the money all the way to charity. So I'm just going to tiptoe a little bit. And yeah, what happens with Wayfair is really like none of her business. And I think they're using this lawsuit to dig into things unnecessarily and to be very, very abusive, which is what you see in a lot of DV and abusive relationships. And again, the power dynamic. Some people don't have the will or the strength to fight in court. And it's just, I'm so triggered by this. I'll continue the questioning. Sorry for the side notes, everybody. I know you guys didn't come here for that. And is the document that follows this that begins on page 34,943 That's a huge handbook. This is the employee handbook. To the best of your knowledge, the Wayfair Studios employee handbook. Yes. And you're familiar with this document, right? Your name is on the first cover page of this at 34,943. I'm not familiar with every detail. A lot of times I will sign things as a high level. I'm not involved in the day-to-day, but I'd be familiar with that is I'd be familiar that there is the document. Okay, you see on page 34,943, the first page of the document after the text. So the first page of the attachment. Yes. Do you see that on the page at the top of it? It says, "So glad you've joined us." And at the bottom, it's signed Steve Sarwitz and Justin Baldoni, co-chairman. Yes. Skipping a page. Here it goes. Okay. And there references here to this thing being the employee handbook, right? Yes. And do you have a recollection of signing off on maybe not every word of this, but at some point in time, signing off on an employee handbook for Wayfair Studios? I don't recall. Do you have any recollection of ever seeing this letter that your name is on here? I don't recall. If you flip through the table of contents on page Heath 34,944 through Heath 34,945, have you ever looked at this? As you look through the table of contents, have you ever looked through the policies and procedures that are contained within this handbook? No. Okay. Well, let's look through some of the policies because I think they're quite commendable. On page 4 of the document, which is Heath 34,946, do you see a reference in the values to Wayfair Studios being a Baha'i-inspired organization? Oh my God, you know what they're doing? They're using their religion as a weapon. This is why they're focused on the hugging, I believe. Don't do this. Blake Lively's camp? No, but you've already done it because it's in a deposition. Oh, I really hate to see that. I really hate to see that. That is not going to play good for a jury. And they keep doing it. Have them play the birth video for that jury where they're praying and Blake Lively's calling it corn. You know? And then there's a cutoff, and then there's an answer, not necessarily continuing of an answer, but this is quite interesting. This portion of a non sequitur answer. What would, or a question? I think, I'm not really sure, but I'm just going to say it. What would, it's not just anything that anyone says, but things like, for example, unwelcome external advances, requests for external favors, some very specific things, sure. Not just anything anyone would term. So I don't want to be broadly saying that anything that anyone perceived to be SH would actually be SH, but rather things as in here, a condition of an individual's employment. So in other words, that if someone were to be asked for extra favors, or if someone to say, like very typical in Hollywood, that would be definitely SH. Question, fair enough, Mr. Sarowitz. If I worked for you and I wanted to understand what our sexual harassment policy, I imagine you would tell me, take a look at this document, right? Ms. Garofalo, objection, witness. I wouldn't be the one answering that question. And then it says, if you were, objection, but I wouldn't be. So it's conjecture. Dang, getting shut down. Is it fair to say that if I wanted to understand what Wayfair Studios' sexual harassment policy was, that this is the place I would look? This document is the place I would look to understand the policy. Objection. I'm not 100% sure how it would be handled since I don't handle the day-to-day operations. Do you understand that Wayfair Studios policy explains that sexual harassment may include a range of subtle and not so subtle behaviors and may involve individuals of the same or different gender? Weren't we just talking about that? Objection. The witness. That's from our policy, correct? That's a piece of our policy? Yes. And he says, yes. Are you aware of whether anyone on the set of Ends With Us advised Mr. Baldoni that his behavior was unwelcome? Answer. That's too broad of a topic. Can you say specifically, more specifically, what? Do you know if any time during the filming of It Ends With Us, anyone advised Mr. Baldoni that he had engaged in behavior that was unwelcome? I just can't. It's too broad. You don't know? I wasn't there. I don't. I don't have any firsthand, as you said before, about other things. I don't have firsthand knowledge. I wasn't there. Do you have any information at all? Were you ever told that anyone told Mr. Baldoni that he had engaged in contact that was unwelcome and request that it be discontinued? Ms. Garofalo, objection. To the extent it calls for information you learned from lawyers, in which case you are instructed not to answer. You may otherwise answer. Witness, attorney privilege. Mr. Gottlieb. So you're saying, other than what you've learned from your attorneys, you're unaware of anything, correct? Other than what you've learned from your attorneys, for example, you've never had a conversation with Mr. Baldoni where he told you that someone on set had told him that his behavior was unwelcome. I don't recall. Are you aware, other than what you've learned from your attorneys, whether any member of the cast or crew ever asked Mr. Baldoni to discontinue a behavior or type of conduct on the set? Other than what I learned from my attorneys, I am not aware of anything. Okay, you've never seen anything from Wayfair's own documents of your own text messages? I don't recall. That's outside of what I talked to my attorneys about. Okay, so you don't know one way or the other. And then that ends. And then, let's see. Oh, it continues. Was there ever a time again prior to this litigation where you learned that someone on the set raised concerns that Mr. Baldoni's behaviors was inappropriate during filming? Haven't they asked the same question like 10 times? I feel like a robot. I am not aware of any HR complaints that were raised or any SAG complaints that were raised by his behavior. Well, that's an interesting way of distinguishing the questions, because that's precisely how your PR people talked about it to the press. So my question to you, sir, was not about HR complaints or SAG complaints. Okay, so my question to you was whether, and I will reread it if I can find it. My question whether you ever became aware prior to this litigation of anyone on set raising concerns that Mr. Baldoni's behavior during filming was inappropriate. I don't recall. Do you see is it fair to say that under the Wayfair Studios policy that the thing you want your employers to or employees to do when they feel like they've experienced this type of prohibited behavior is promptly advise the offender that his or her behavior is unwelcome and request that it be discontinued? Objection. You can answer. The witness. Yes. Okay, I have a question for the chat. If you experience any unwelcomed or any behavior that is uncomfortable, what would you say? Would you say that that's making you uncomfortable? Or maybe call a hotline? You know? And the questioning continues. And what is supposed to happen when an individual follows that policy to the letter? Objection. Although I'm not responsible for this because I'm not the one actually implementing this, the behavior should stop. And that would not be my individual responsibility as an individual. So I guess what their defense is going to be is, oh, Blake Lively was so uncomfortable she didn't say anything out of fear of retaliation, maybe. Maybe that could be a kind of argument to this deposition. Steve, Sarah, what's deposition for the chat, everybody? Thank you all for staying with me. Here's another question. And this deposition is 68 pages long, by the way. And we're on page 30. So I might have to end and continue, but I like reading the depositions in their entirety because I think there's some breadcrumbs and some nuggets in it that maybe some other content creators haven't read or picked up on, but I just like to read it. So thank you guys again for being here. Question. But the reason the policy is written this way is because the hope is by promptly reporting it and asking for the behavior to be discontinued, who's ever doing it will stop. Objection. I would not be personally involved, but that would be the hope. Here we go again about the understanding of the policy. Here's another question. And the next section under supervisor and manager responsibilities states, now, do you think the manager responsibilities will also apply to Blake Lively because she has that producing credit that she got from the PGA and that letter that she presented to the PGA about what she did on the set of It Ends With Us? If any supervisor or managers becomes aware of violation of this policy, they are obligated to report the violation to Human Resources Management so Wayfair Studios can investigate and appropriate take corrective actions. Do you see that? Where's that? In the section entitled Supervisor and Manager Responsibilities. Okay, yes. Did you supervise or manage any people at Wayfair Studios during the film It Ends With Us? No. Did Mr. Heath? Yes. Before Miss Garofalo was your lawyer, right? Yes. I think that was a different question because it skipped a page. You learned about that completely independently of anything that could fall within an attorney-client privilege because you learned about it in 2023, right? Objection, not completely independent. You know, in 2023, that Miss Lively's legal team had sent a list of protections for a return to production, and you talked about it with Mr. Baldoni, didn't you? Did you guys hear that? I didn't hear that. I'm trying to answer this honestly. So give me a second to describe what I think of that list. I believe that Miss Lively sent a list of things that she insinuated we did, which we never did. And that forced us, basically, after millions of dollars invested to the movie, to sign a list of things that we would do no more, that were never done, as a ploy to take over the movie, which she eventually did. How many people agree with that statement? So yes, I believe that Miss Lively did send a list of demands for her return to work. And we did sign the list. But when we signed it with the understanding that we did not agree that we had actually done those things. What did you do? Since you're stating with some amount of conviction that the actions described in the list did not occur and were, as you said, a ploy. What did you do to satisfy yourself that what you just said is factual? Objection. How did you satisfy yourself that those behaviors or activities or compliance or whatever you would like to call them did not occur? As I have stated previously, the two main things that she said about me are complete or partial lies. This is my direct experience. She accused me of being in a scene, at a scene which I was not at. She said she was scantily clad. An actor who was on set with her testified she was not. Publicly testified that she was not scantily clad. And then, throughout the course of this case, the evidence has come out that much of what she said was not true, or partially true, or twisted to make it seem worse. Nice. This needs to be, I wish these depositions were broadcasted. For example, she said that Justin said, and there's a skipped page. Yep, it's a whole skipped page. So it goes from 211 to 213. So this is going to be cut off. Wayfair Studios will maintain appropriate documentation and tracking to ensure that reasonable progress is made. Answer, yes. Did that happen with respect to what occurred on set in It Ends With Us? Objection. Two ways that a formal complaint would, I'm not aware of any formal complaints, of any formal reports, of any allegations made either to, as I mentioned before, either to SAG or to HR. Question. So your answer is you're not aware of any investigation of this type of referenced on the document with the base number 34949 taking place? I am not aware of any reported allegations. What's a formal report? Typically, again, I'm not an expert on this. I don't manage sets, but what I've been told and what I've learned through the course of this case is that the two options, if there was and then we're skipping 4 pages now, and the last bit of this is favors verbal abuse of an sexual nature, commentary about an individual's body, sexual prowess, or sexual deficiencies. Yes, question also, as read. Sexual jokes and innuendo, leering, whistling, or touching, insulting or obscene comments or gestures, display in the workplace of subjective objects or pictures, and other physical, verbal, or visual conduct of sexual nature. Is that a good description of what constitutes as sexual harassment under Wayfair's policy? Why does that sound like Blake Lively did all of those things all in that one sentence? Not all of them, but most of them, my opinion. And they were so kind not to report her for SH, which I really think they should have. Talking about no teeth, that is why would you say that to somebody? It's like bone hitting wood. What is that? Is that an innuendo? I don't know, but it just sounds, coming out of her mouth, it sounds like it could be an innuendo. Do you have any knowledge of whether any conduct of that type occurred on set? I have no knowledge of any of that. Okay, you don't know one way or the other. I have no knowledge of any of that ever occurring. It's my belief that none of that ever occurred on set. Okay, I have no direct knowledge. So, and then here's a question. So if an investigation is not conducted, and if an employee believes their complaint is not resolved, what does the policy say the employee or covered person should do? Objection. Do you need time to read the policy? Witness. Can you point me to that? Gottlieb. Take a look at the section that says violation of this policy. Okay, got it. Do you see the paragraph that begins with employees? If employees believe their complaint is not resolved, do you see that? So what you're saying is, if anything actually occurred, Miss Garofalo, take a minute. The witness. Yeah, so I should, Miss Garofalo, read it, and then you can respond. Another page is skipped. Mr. Baldoni is mentioned. Answer. I am not aware of any complaints that were not resolved. Complaints describing unwelcome behavior. I am not aware of any complaints that were not resolved. Okay. And can I answer a little bit more? Sure. Here it gets juicy. I believe that after there are no further complaints after the 17 points. So even after very early on in filming, I was not aware of any complaints. I am not aware of any written complaints, any HR complaints. I am not aware of any unresolved complaints. Okay, are you? I know that they were insinuated, but I am not aware of any unresolved complaints. Are you aware of any investigation that took place into any conduct that took place on the set prior to this litigation? I am not aware of any complaints that necessitated an investigation prior to this investigation. So the answer to my question is no, investigate it and address. Do you see that? Yes. Oh, and it's basically the same. It just goes in a circle. And we've already established that there was no investigation of any kind prior to the initiation of litigation in this case. Is that correct? I am not aware of any event that would facilitate or require an investigation. So as I said before, I'm not aware of any event that would have required an investigation. And one thing I forgot to mention is that we have talked to counsel and that there was no event that they thought would require an investigation. Who is we? Jamie and Justin. And I don't really know. I wasn't involved in that conversation. Well, how did you just remember this? I knew about it before. I had forgotten to say it before. The counsel that also verified along with our own, there is no need for an investigation at these expensive things occurred throughout the production. I don't know why they said expensive. Okay. So when these things occurred, I can't tell you exactly when they occurred, but throughout the production, in addition to a lot of stress, in addition to the people being fired. Sorry, go ahead. And this 17-point list essentially served very effectively, in my opinion. And I will give her a lot of credit for this, as essentially a knife to our throat throughout all of this, so she could get away with the crime she got away with. I thought you weren't involved in the production of the film. Correct. You only visited the set twice, right? Isn't that what your lawyer told Forbes? That's what I told Forbes, and that's what I'm telling you. I visited the set twice. That's the truth. That's the truth. Well, you use the word we a lot in that speech you just gave. And so what I'm wondering is, were you involved in the production of the film, or are you in using the word we describing Wayfair Studios? Objection. I'm using the word we as in the entity Wayfair Studios, of which I'm the majority investor. Not that I was individually involved in any of the action. Not that I have personal knowledge of any of this. Not that I was involved in any of this personally or have individual knowledge. However, the effects have hurt me, have hurt my company and myself as an owner of the company in that respect. Question. What I'm trying to get at, Mr. Sorowitz, is did you, with respect to Miss Lively's allegation and whatever label you want to give the sort of content of the 17-point list, okay? I don't want to fight over whether their allegations or claims or whatever they are. But the substance of what is in the 7-point list, did you know anything about the events described from firsthand knowledge? Objection. No. Did you know anything about what was described in the document other than what you have learned from Mr. Baldoni? Objection. Is it possible we could review the 17-point list? We are going to get to a document in a minute. But as you sit here today, your understanding of your understanding of what was happening on the set, which have you testified you weren't there every day, you visited twice, you weren't involved in the production. Do you ever recall learning anything about what was going on the set other than from Mr. Baldoni? Yes. Okay. What else do you recall as you sit here today? I talked to Brendan Sklar when I was on set, and he was infused. He was effusive in his praise for Justin, his directing, Wayfair, how he had been treated in general. So I met with him personally on the day I was on set. Which of the 2 days? The first day I was on set. Okay. My own experience from that day on set was that I did not witness anything untoward, but I would not have. Again, I was only on set twice, so that's what I would know firsthand. Okay, and so you had a conversation that you can recall with Mr. Skanar, which was very positive about his experience. Effusive, yes, effusive, your word. And you obviously had a conversation along the way with Mr. Baldoni. Is there anything else you can think of as you're sitting here today? Any other person from whom you might have learned information about what was happening on set? Yes. Who was that? Jamie Heath. Okay. So you had a conversation with Mr. Heath during production? Yes. And did you talk to Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni by phone from time to time during production? I don't recall, but I assume so. Again, a few pages are skipped. It goes back into questioning. Which was the first of the 2 days that you visited the set? Yes. Okay. And how long would you say that interaction with Miss Lively took? A minute or two. Okay. Anything else? I know this can be tedious, but anything else that you can think of in your head as you sit here today that informed your understanding of what happened on set? I'm friends with one of the actors. Which one? Adam Moonshine. And did you have conversations with Mr. Moonshine about what was happening on set? Nothing negative. My question was, did you have any conversations with Mr. Manchetti about what was happening on set? Just his experience. And when did you talk to Mr. Manchetti? I don't recall. Who is Mr. Manchetti? Mancini? Do you recall how many scenes in the movie Mr. Manchetti was in? I don't know. Would it refresh your recollection if I told you? Yeah, that sounds right to me. Do you know what scene he was in? Yes, he was in the birthing scene. Do you know? Oh, I guess, is that Mancini? I thought we were talking about. Okay, anyways. Yes, he was in the birthing scene. Do you know what character he played? He played the doctor. The doctor that sat in between Miss Lively's legs while she was giving birth. I wasn't there. Have you seen the movie? I've seen the movie. In that, what happens in the scene, I don't recall. Did you talk to Mr. Mancini before he went to act for the scene? No. Did you talk to him after that? Yes. What was the nature of your conversation? Just his experience. And what did he talk about? Sounded like it was positive. Anything specific you can recall? No, I don't recall. Also, he confirmed my memory, which is that I wasn't there at that scene. When did that happen? After, during the course of litigation. After litigation, I just double checked and said, I wasn't there for that scene. He said, I know, I was there. When did that conversation take place? I don't call. Do you know roughly, like, I'm so sorry, did I just totally miss a page? Like month that would have occurred in? I don't recall the exact month. Do you talk to him on the phone? Yes. Do you recall about how long the conversation was? No. Do you talk to him about anything else? I don't recall. And so the nature of that call, to the best of your recollection, is that you asked him if he had a recollection of you being present for the birth scene, and he said he did not. I told my recollection, and again, that is going back to the call. I told him I wasn't there for the birth scene, and that I am wrong about that, and he confirmed that. He said, yeah, you're right. You weren't there. Correct. Let's take a look at Exhibit 8. Question. Mr. Service, you have been handed a document marked Exhibit H, which is a document bearing the Bates number Nathan 3767, and then an attachment that is produced in narrative format to this document. It's a little small for my old eyes, I think. I also need these to read this document. Miss Garofalo, he needs a microscope. Gottlieb, this document is the first page of Nathan, Exhibit 7. 8, stenographer report 8. Garofalo, hold on. Objection. I have seen a lot of evidence personally involving me and others that Miss Lively's perspective is false. And I think misleading, false, and misleading often. As I mentioned with my own personal things in the deposition, I don't like to speak to others, but I can speak to the facts. The supposed facts she said about me were either misleading or completely wrong. I believe on purpose. For example, Miss Lively. Miss Lively said I was going to, or I was at a scene I was not at, insinuating for the entire world that I wanted to go and see a birthing scene because she was scantily clad, which I wasn't there, but I've heard she was also not scantily clad. Given experience with Miss Lively, my personal experience with Miss Lively, that during her deposition, she insinuated I threatened to ill her and her husband, which I've never done. And even in the evidence that they have proffered in their own complaint, it very specifically says I did not threaten to ill them. And I was very clear about that. But she reported it as such. Given the misleading things she said about me, I have every reason, and given my long-term friendship with Justin, where he has been sweet and kind to many, many people for many years, and his 19-year experience in the film industry, with excellent relations with many people who I've met. Given my experience with both of them, I have reason to mistrust Miss Lively, direct reason to distrust Miss Lively, and reason to trust Justin Baldoni. How many reasons can you think of not to trust either Ryan Reynolds or Blake Lively just out of what was in her lawsuit? Understood. Isn't everything you and I just talked about the reason why corporations do investigations when allegations arise? Objection. As I've stated before, I'm unaware of any complaints that were lodged that would require an investigation prior to the actual CRD complaint. Do you see a reference on the next page of this chart to May 16, 2023? There's a description of a meeting in BL trailer regarding wardrobe concern. And then is it skipping another thing? I think it's skipping a couple pages, but let me see if I can get this out. Were you aware that while you have seen what Miss Baker or Miss Carroll testified this meeting on the 16th? No. and I think this is a trailer thing. Have you talked to any recipient, witness to that event to come to an understanding of what occurred? No. So for all you know, Miss Lively's description of this event could be completely accurate. Here it goes. Given the lack of accuracy that I've seen by almost everything else that Blake Lively has said, I've come to doubt her veracity as a witness on almost everything she says. Given things that I know, given all the evidence I've seen over and over again, however, it is possible that she could be accurate on something as well. I really feel like if this was a drinking game and we had to drink every time there was a statement of questioning of accuracy and trust, we would all be dying of liver failure right now. I'm just saying, or of alcohol poisoning, because this is gold. And mind you, I hope that they bring this up at the jury. I mean, this is better than what Johnny Depp was testifying against Amber Heard. Okay. And to figure out whether she was accurate, you'd probably want to know what the eyewitness to the events thought, right? There. We have a whole legal team. And again, as I mentioned, I'm an investor in many companies. I don't get involved in the details, but the legal team is involved. Okay, we're going to go to EEO for a second. Witness, we are not AEO. Now we are, okay? In her deposition, Miss Carroll testified about this event with Mr. Heath. She said the following. Oh, is this the makeup artist? Blake was having body makeup done in the trailer by Vivian. We heard the door and looked at and went, whoa, whoa, whoa. And it was Jamie at the door. I grabbed a cutting tape, which was over my chair, and held it up to try and cover her. And Blake said, whoa, whoa. Don't come in. And he said, it'll only take a second. And that's when all of this action was happening. He stayed in the trailer. They had a discussion and he left. Are you with me? Yes, I'm with you. No, that's not okay. That's short enough. Go ahead. Okay. Are you aware that Miss Slate had complained to Mr. Baldoni about him calling her or referring her as sexy around May 18, 2023? I am not aware of that. At any time prior to this litigation, did you become aware of that? No. Did you ever become aware that Miss Slate had gone to Mr. Baldoni and said, I don't like that comment, please stop? I don't know the details of that incident. Did you know that Miss Lively also around the same time complained to Mr. Baldoni about him referring to her as sexy? I am not aware of that. Would you be interested in what Miss Slate, I recognize you said you don't believe anything Miss Lively says or something to that effect, or you find her credible. What about Miss Slate? I would not use the word incredible. Question lacking in credibility. When I say incredible, is that a fair description of your views? Much better. Okay, what would you say about Miss Slate? I'm aware that in the course of this production that there's issues. I'm aware that Miss Slate had an issue. I'm not aware of the specifics. I'm aware that it was resolved, and to my knowledge, there was nothing else brought up. So I'm aware that, I'm aware that in the course of production, there can be issues. And I was aware there was an issue with Miss Slate and that it was resolved. In determining whether there were problems on set, would it be of interest to you to know Jenny Slate's perspective on what happened that day? Objection. Witness, I believe that there will be up to a jury during the trial. In other words, I don't have time to get into every detail. I'm the chairman. I don't have time to get into every detail. I think at some point in time, you'll know I'll have time. We've had kind of a whirlwind, 16-hour day thing with this case, in addition to the other work I do, which is quite expansive. And so I haven't had time to look in detail. At some point in time, as we get further into trial, I may get more into details, but most likely I'm not involved with the day-to-day operations. Would you have wanted to know if I'm going to butcher this name, I'm just going to say T, had showed you this back in August of 2024 and said, hey, just so you know, Jenny Slate had a concern that she expressed to Justin on the set. Would you have wanted to know that? I was aware of that Miss Slate had a concern and that concern was taken care of, and I was not aware that there were further concerns. Okay. You never talked to Miss Slate about that, I assume. I never talked to Miss Slate at all. Okay. I didn't see her at the premiere along with the other actors. I've never talked to her before or during the premiere. I've never seen her. I've never met her. I've never spoken to her or met her. Have you read Miss Slate's testimony in her deposition in this case? I have not. Would you expect that Miss Slate's testimony about the sexy comment that had been made to Miss Lively be similar or dissimilar from Miss Lively's description? Objection. I wasn't there. I don't know. Would it matter to you? Objection. What would matter to me is that any problems which or issues which occurred, as you mentioned, and I will repeat your words, nobody's perfect, Justin's included. And if Justin said something that was inappropriate or anybody says something because in the course of filming or a film largely based on X about a novel that has a ton of X in it, if the word X sexy was used inappropriately in that context, I would hope that would be rectified. And I understand that nobody's perfect, and I would expect that that would be dealt with. And I was under the impression that it was dealt with and handled. And then it goes to another page. It's cut off, but it goes problems, period. So I don't have enough information based on what you've told me as to how bad the problems were on set and what was done to resolve it based on the comments you gave me. Question. Are you aware of the meeting that took place in New York on January 4, 2024 that Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath attended? I believe I became aware of that through my attorneys. Have you ever heard the meeting described as an ambush? Objection to the extent that the question calls for attorney-client communications. Attorney-client What? I wonder, why would that be under attorney-client communications if they weren't? Okay. He just testified he heard it from his attorneys. You're instructed not to answer. I wonder if that means something. It might not, but it might. Maybe I'm just overlooking things. I'm not interested in what you may have learned from your attorneys. Did Mr. Baldoni or Mr. Heath ever describe that meeting to you as an ambush? I don't recall. Have you ever heard that meeting described as an HR complaints meeting? Not to my knowledge. Not to my recollection. So are they calling it an HR meeting instead of a production meeting? Anyways, well, why don't you turn to page 12 of the document we're in? and look 5 lines down. It says page 12 at the bottom. I got it. Just getting there. Sorry, the Bates numbers are not on this because it was produced in its native format. I've got this one. It looks like we're on the same page. That one you can read without my glasses. I can. Wow, they're really doing digs at him. And if you can look 5 lines down where it says Chris Sergeant 1 AD during phase 2. Yep. Note says, as read, he was in the production planning meeting turned HR complaints meeting on January 4, 2024. Do you see that? Answer. Who is Chris Sergeant? All I know is what's written here. Yeah, I'm not familiar with this. Did you know that there was somebody at Wayfair Studios who referred to the meeting that took place on January 4, 2025 as the HR complaints meeting? I was never aware until this very moment that it was ever referred to as that. Let's mark another calendar. Stenographer, reporter, Exhibit 9 for the record. Exhibit 9 is marked for identification. Witness. And I'm unaware of any HR complaints that were filed. Mr. Sarwitz, you've been handed what's been marked as Exhibit 9. Exhibit 9 is a document bearing the Bates number Heath 35492 through Heath 35493. This is a text message exchanged on May 28, 2023 before Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni. You can take a minute to take a look. I got it. Okay, Mr. Sarowitz, we just looked at that chart that had references to Miss Slate and Miss Lively and the sexy comments occurring between. The first date we looked at was around May 11, and that was the last date was around record. The time, 5:03 p.m. Ms. Garofalo, okay, I'm going to withdraw my objections. We've clarified the issue and you can proceed with your question on Exhibit 8. I don't know why it's skipping. Exhibit 10. All right, so Mr. Saris, you testified earlier, I think, that you'll correct me if I get this wrong, that you had lost a significant amount of money as a result of what you believe to be Miss Lively's conduct. Is that correct? Yes. Morning, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share. And you put a dollar amount on that. What you thought you had lost. Millions. I couldn't put an exact dollar. I haven't, to be honest. I haven't done it. I just looked at it as something I was not ever going to go after her for. Interesting. So they weren't going to recoup their millions of dollars. And maybe if they would have tracked that, they could have done a better job at the corporation extortion or something like that, in my opinion. It's interesting. Okay. And you said you were going to go and you said you were going to go after her for other things. You had asked me a question as to things I was upset about. I listed them before. I don't know if you need me to list them out again. So can we go back to my previous answer? It's cut off. Return to production letter that we were discussing earlier. That's a question. Yes. This is right around the time the letter was circulated. Is that right? I don't recall, but perhaps. Did Wayfair agree to meet these 17 conditions? Ultimately, we signed the letter under duress, with a caveat saying that we didn't necessarily agree with it, but we signed the letter in order to get her back to work. But we had not done the things in the first place and continued not to do the things that were in the letter. Mr. Gottlieb, I will strike as non-responsive. My question was just whether Wayfair agreed to meet the 17 conditions, yes or no. We agreed to continue not to do the things we weren't doing. The letter of condition, something you consider to be sensitive. Objection. Can you be more specific? And then it gets cut off. Miss Garofalo, I'm sure it is. Mr. Gottlieb goes on to his questioning. And this is the last 8 pages of this deposition. Just checking with the chat. Hi, Sandy Jean. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Like, share, subscribe. Let us know what else you would like to hear. We're just in the middle of Steve Sarowit's deposition. It's kind of juicy if you read through it, kind of spicy, and I definitely don't like Mr. Gottlieb's questioning. Okay. Let's look at the exhibit that you have in front of you, sir. Exhibit 12. Exhibit 12 is a document bearing the Bates number Sarowitz 80 through 82. It's a text exchange on January 5, 2024. And this is a text change that appears to involve some of the same individuals as the exhibit we just looked at, I believe. But if you notice a difference, please tell me. I don't. Okay, so this is a text chain with some of the title at the top here. You see prayers in support. Is that the same title of the sort of text thread that we looked at Exhibit 11? Yes. On January 5, 2024, did Mr. Baldoni reach out to you just to discuss the meeting that had happened the day before on January 4th? Can I have time to familiar myself with this document? Sure. Thank you. I don't recall. So you don't recall talking to Mr. Baldoni on or around January 5th about the meeting that happened in the apartment building with Miss Lively and Mr. Reynolds on January 4. I know we talked at some point in time. I don't know the exact date we talked. Okay, you see at 6:35 p.m. on January 5, Mr. Baldoni sends somewhat lengthy text message, which is on the page Sarowitz 80, and then follows that up at 6:45 p.m. on the page Sarowitz 81. Uh-huh. Is this the description that you see here generally consistent with any conversation you ever had with Mr. Baldoni where he described the meeting to you like this? Objection. I don't recall. Do you have any recollection of when the first time you learned about the January 4, 2024 meeting? I don't remember exactly when I learned, and then it gets cut off. And then this focuses on the Claire Ayub recording. It's cut off, and then it continues. You had with Miss Ayub was before this occurred on September 27, this conversation, or after? I don't recall. Were you asked to have a call with Claire Ayub? I know I did. I don't recall how it came up. Does it seem like the kind of thing that you would have affirmatively reached out on your own to request? She was coming to show her film at the theater. I don't recall how the call came about. That's interesting. If you had your calendar from September or August of 2024, do you think you might find a Zoom meeting or meeting indication? Might we possibly find one with Miss Ayub? Yes. Do you recall knowing when you spoke to Miss Ayub that there had been problems on the set of Empire Waste? I visited the set of Empire Waste and was not aware of any problems. Okay. But again, I don't run the day-to-day. Mr. Gottlieb. Okay, we're going to go to AEO now. And we're going to mark as an exhibit the audio file that has the Bates number BL33428. Stenographer as exhibit 14. So this must be the recording. Mr. Gottlieb. So we will mark the exhibit as 14. The document produced in its native format has the Bates number BL33428. We're going to mark that. This is all you'll see that. This is all you'll see with it. Before we start playing that, Mr. Sarowitz, we have produced in this litigation a recording of this call. Have you received that production? The call you had with Claire Ayub? Yes. Have you listened to it? Yes. Have you listened to all of it? Yes. I assumed you have listened to all of it because earlier mentioned you were seeking to have it de-designated. Is that right? It was not my decision to de-designate it, but I am okay with that decision. Like, subscribe, everybody. Thank you for everybody being here. Okay, how many times have you listened to the call at this point in time? Once. All right. We're going to play just a little of it to ask if this is the call. And then we'll stop and I will ask you some more questions. So why don't we start? Plays the audio. All right, let's stop. Is that your voice that you just heard saying, it's been a long few weeks? Yes. And was the woman's voice speaking to you right before that Miss Ayub's voice? Yes. And is that the recording of the call that we've been talking about here that I just played for you a small clip of? Yes. Do you know who Elise that was referred skips a page or a couple of pages? And then it says, and then later in the page as read, they went after everything we had. Luckily, I was out of it. So, like, nobody mentioned me. That's because I'm a nobody. In other words, referring to myself, I wasn't very important. Okay, thank you for that. How was Mr. Heath stopping you? Or how was Mr. Heath stopping what you viewed as the worst of the worst from coming out? Objection. This is what our crisis PR people were working on, is stopping the public attacks on us, the ongoing everyday public attacks on us. Okay, do you recall later in the conversation discussing with Miss Ayub that had happened on the set, or what happened on the set of It Ends With Us? I don't think I could have because I wasn't on the set of It Ends With Us. But is there anything in the document which would talk about that? You weren't there. I was only there, as I mentioned briefly, for part of one day and just a few minutes on another. I really wasn't on the set. Would it surprise you to learn that when Miss Ayub said, as read, I wasn't there, so I don't know what it's like, your response was, I was. Can you refer me to that page? You don't have any recollection of saying to Miss Ayub, I was there on set? Again, can you refer me to the page? Pages 30 to 31. Okay, just give me a second or two to read it, and I'll go through it as quickly as I can because I realize we're running short on time. Thank you, sir. Okay. And you see that you make a reference to there being two different sets. And Miss Ayub says, as read, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I don't know what it's like. And you said, right. And you said I was, right? As read. We will have to be defensive for years. It talks about as read. There will be stuff coming at us. So I believe, based on the context, that this is very consistent with what I said before, that I would defend the studio. That's what I meant by that. Do you understand do you understand the difference between defense and offense? Objection. Witness, yes. Doesn't this go back to earlier conversations we had about some of the tenets of your faith? Again, they are attacking his faith. Please stop it. Just getting really annoyed. Like, how much of yourself can these piece of people possibly attack? They've attacked Justin Baldoni's appearance, if you notice in the unscripted video. They're attacking their faith, their gender, there's just so many mind games being played. I've lost all respect because they're harping so much on on their on their faith that is trying to make this world a better place. The distinction, there's an objection. The distinction between self-defense and retaliation. Objection. Let me try that a different way, sir. Is saying I will never ever let up going after you for the rest of my career something you want your attorneys to say to reporters at news organizations? What the fluff? That was off the wall. Objection. I don't know the context, so I can't comment on something I don't have the context. I don't know what was done. For example, in the course of this case, someone threatened my daughter's life. If I knew who did that, I would say something similar to that, even as Baha'i, because we're not perfect human beings. There are things that are beyond the pale of and people get angry. I'm sure you, like me, have a temper. And occasionally we say things we might even regret. So I would like to know what the whole context is before I can comment on it. Do you have any more context on this you can give me? I do not. Your attorneys do. Did you ever learn of anything horrific or terrible that Mr. Reese had done or said in public? Did you ever see anything that he said? And that is where the deposition ends for Mr. Sarowitz. So I know this was a longer live than what I intended. My main objection of this live was to just point out that males can be victims of SH, SA, DV, and other abuses. And this is a perfect example of what Justin Baldoni experienced. Like the kissing, he didn't want to kiss Blake Lively, but she rewrote a scene. Did they talk about it? I don't know. Maybe there's some more context that they can say, but this definitely seems like there were things used to take over the movie, and that maybe necessarily Blake Lively wasn't SH'd, but maybe it was actually Justin Baldoni that was SH'd. I don't know. That's just another view of mine. Let me know what you guys think. Like, subscribe. Thank you for hanging out with me for 2 hours. Have a beautiful weekend, and we'll see you next time, house guests. Thanks all. Bye-bye.